Alright, this is the RG Slide, and if you've always dreamed of owning an Xperia Play, it's finally here. Kind of. It does have some quirks, but it's rapidly become one of my favorite handhelds of my arguably a little too big handheld collection. And yes, a big part of that is that the sliding mechanism is stupid satisfying. If you're new here, hey, I'm Coulter, and on this channel we dive into retro handhelds and weird tech and everything in between. So if that sounds good to you, feel free to hit subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. And I've got some pretty weird projects in the works, so yeah, I'd want to see them. So let's just start right here with the sliding mechanism. It is freaking wonderful. Exactly what you'd hope it would be. Exactly what you remember from the Sidekick from the 2000s, if you're old enough to remember that. And definitely a very similar action to what we find on the PSP Go, which obviously we took a bit of inspiration from here. This one just has a lot more torque because it's got more weight to throw around there, as we'll cover in a second. It's also delightful that when you slide it up, it does wake up, which is super nice. Then you just go ahead and hit select and you're off in the Android interface and off to game, or if you have this held, off into the RG interface. So very console-like feeling, but if you came for the slide, you got the slide for sure. As far as the design of this guy, it does weigh in at about 1/3 of a kilogram, which for perspective is a tad heavier than even the original Game Boy. And honestly, this is the closest handheld I can find in size to this guy. So if you're hoping to find the pocketability of the original PSP Go, then this is definitely not the guy that you're looking for. He does fit in my pocket, but he will not fit in all pockets for sure. For the ports, we've got a headphone jack, we've got a USB-C combo jack, little LED indicator, we've got our L1 and L2 triggers. Take a bit of an adjustment, although I don't hate them. You just gotta know that your L1 is right closest and then your L2 is the reach, but pretty sure that's pretty standard across Anbernic handhelds at this point. This is your hold to set it to RG launcher mode, which I thought was a little weird to have these side buttons. But when you think about the fact that you can use this in just closed mode and just watch YouTube on this, then it makes sense to have the touchscreen and then your back button available. So I guess you could call that the media mode for the RG Slide, which the PSP Go also built a lot of its marketing off of. But most of the time, we're gonna be out here. And this D-pad feels fantastic. Pretty solid standard Anbernic buttons. Definitely their slightly mushier variety, which I like. And the joysticks, I actually have no complaints. They do not have any cardinal snapping from my testing. Yes, they're a little small, but weirdly enough, because they're recessed, I actually feel like they're the right size by the time my thumbs reach over here. And I've been doing a lot of Moonlight streaming of WiiU gameplay over to this guy. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, big pass on the controls feel. Ergonomics wise, it feels very good in the hand. It is not going to cut into your hand like the PSP Go did, which definitely restricted people's play sessions for quite a while. But I've had at least a couple of play sessions of 2+ hours and no concerns about this guy, no weird top heaviness. It's a very balanced handheld, which is saying a lot considering its size. And I think that size is due to the Android chipset that they've been using in their handhelds. They have yet to produce a small Android handheld. And I think it's because they have a particular couple of boards they like to use to create these Android powered handhelds. Once you factor in the fact that they add active cooling to these, and they add obviously the screen and this sliding mechanism and all the controls, unless you have 100% control of the design end to end, like Sony did with the PSP Go, it's harder to achieve that level of smallness. So considering that they're dealing with one part original design, one part let's see what we can pull off the shelf to get a handheld together for sale, I think it's pretty impressive what they come up with. The screen is a 4.7-inch 4:3 ratio 960p 120Hz screen, and I've had zero complaints about it. I know some people were concerned about the 4:3 being kind of weird versus more of a 16:9 like this guy. And ironically, when you play PSP games on this guy, you do actually get a couple of black bars top and bottom. However, because the majority of consoles this thing can emulate on device without streaming is of that 4:3 generation, it actually produces a much better scaling experience and a generally more authentic feel, which we'll cover in the game testing shortly. The rest of the specs are on the screen, but expect it to basically be the same specs as the, I think it was the RG406V that I reviewed last year, which was a very capable handheld. I just didn't use it very much because it was kind of a big chunky Game Boy thing, whereas this guy, I don't know, this form factor is really speaking to me for some reason. So without further ado, let's get in the game, shall we? Real quick before we hop into game testing, a few setup quirks I encountered. For one, my SD card slot appears to be broken. I just for the life of me could not get any card to stay in that slot. They just keep shooting right out. So I think the latch might be broken on mine, but hopefully that's an isolated issue and not some wider spread thing. Also, like on the RG557, I had to set forced landscape to make sure all apps were forced to be in landscape mode. Also, for some reason, I noticed that the fan, it often sets itself to stop. I have to go in here and set it to auto so that the fans will kick on, because once you start pushing the performance of this guy, you do want that fan to be on, and especially when you use auto mode to set it into high, and especially when you set the CPU to high mode, you're going to want that fan actively cooling this guy so that he doesn't thermal throttle down. I won't go over all the settings in the quick menu because it's the same as the usual Android experience with Anbernic, but the biggest one we're going to reference a lot is just switching between Switch mode and Xbox mode for the button layout, which is very handy. All right, hopping into game settings. Here I have the Incredibles wonderful GameCube game running at 2x resolution, effectively making it 720p, which, by the way, looks wonderful on this 4x3 960p display. And this is using the Vulkan backend, but for some reason that didn't run the Incredibles as well as Vanilla Dolphin, so I switched over to Vanilla Dolphin and now he's all happy, so okay. And yeah, as you can see, we're getting a nice smooth 30 FPS in this guy. Over on PS2, I uninstalled the pre-installed version of Aether SX2 and installed the very recently released Neether SX 2.0, link in the description of that GitHub. And thankfully the RG launcher picks up Neether SX2 automatically, as you can see, boots right over. So we don't have to leave the nice Anbernic launcher experience if you want that more console feel. And we're gonna run it with the Vulkan back end with 2x upscaling, giving us a 1024p resolution, which is actually a bit higher than this screen is. And as we can see, we're getting a nice locked 30 FPS in this guy, which is fantastic. And I've been pretty impressed. I actually rarely turn on the high CPU mode. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off here and just see if we maintain those same results. And yeah, looks like we're holding steady at a lovely 30, which is fantastic. And I can't see a single thing I'm shooting. Over to something way easier to run. We got some Game Boy Advance emulation. This is less to show that it can run it, and more to show off A, the crisp upscaling because of the 4:3 aspect ratio, and B, the lovely Anbernic bezels they add to anything that's running through RetroArch, which I'm always a fan of those small touches to make it feel a little more authentic, a little more original, which is super nice. And I'm always a fan of those little nostalgic touches, even though sure you lose a little bit of your screen real estate, but just seeing that little border at the bottom just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Isn't that nice? And isn't that why we buy these consoles? To feel the warm fuzzies of games we played when we were kids? That's what I do, at least. Over to 3DS, we'll notice that we do get some load-in stutter, but once the game is actually loaded in, it runs super nice and smooth. And we'll see like a little choppiness here as we pan around the track for the first time. And yeah, pretty long white screen there, but then once we actually get in game, then we're sitting pretty. Yeah, just like that, now we have a nice smooth 60. And I still can't see where I'm going. As alluded to earlier though, now one of my favorite uses for this guy is actually for it to be my compact little semi-pocketable Moonlight streaming device. Obviously it has a really good Wi-Fi chip in it as shown in the specs earlier, but I have my Moonlight set up for my gaming PC to hop in here and just hit up EmuDeck, which then boots me into the Windows version of EmuDeck, essentially just a friendly way to set up Emulation Station really quickly on there. Then you'll see I have my library set up all wonderfully and prettily in this Wii theme that I love. And now I can play Boy in Forest running at a pretty smooth 60 FPS from my gaming PC to this handheld, and it feels pretty native. Like once I'm loaded into game, I really forget that I'm game streaming, and I really enjoy just sitting back and playing games from this handheld. And the beautiful part of Moonlight streaming is that it's not using hardly any processing on the handheld at all. And so I played this game for probably 2 hours the other day, and my battery went from like 95 to 70. So I only lost like 25% battery, which was sick. And I even set my Cemu WiiU emulator settings to adjust the game's resolution to a 4:3 resolution so that it'll fill the screen properly and feel just that much more native on the handheld, which I love. In case that was blurry the whole time I shot that, there's a much better FPS counter to look at. Long story short, this is the longest run that I've played Boy in Forest, and I actually made it to Harito Village. That shows you how bad I've been at sticking to this game. As far as native Android gaming, the first game I wanted to really put to the test was Fortnite. However, unfortunately, the Mali GPU in this guy does not meet the minimum requirements, and Epic straight up blocked the game from installing. So if you're hoping this would be your Fortnite machine, you're out of luck, unfortunately. I did, however, try Minecraft, and although I did need to notch up the CPU settings to high so that way I can get a pretty smoother feel, it does play quite nicely, so yay, yet another Minecraft machine in the house. Another random note is apparently you can do video out from this USB-C port. I tried it with my Thunderbolt 4 monitor and nothing happened, and I've heard it works fine. However, people have noted they've had issues charging it and doing video out at the same time, so this might not be your emulation station hub you're looking for, but your results may vary. So is this thing perfect? No. But is it surprisingly capable, really fun, and quite unique? Yes. Heck yes it is. Honestly, Android-based emulation was the reason I dailyed an Android phone for the last 2 years, with the thought that I would just hook up a Kishi to it whenever I wanted a game, and then that like happened twice. So I'm back on an iPhone now, and because of that, it's really nice to have a dedicated Android gaming device that is exactly what I was hoping my Android would be. I was hoping it would be kind of a Sony Xperia Play on steroids that could play all of my modern games. And the fact that I can treat it like a dedicated console and I don't have to have my Messenger apps and all of that and WhatsApp and whatever installed on it is really nice. I just want a gaming device to be a gaming device and a phone to be a phone, and never the two shall cross. If you ask my wife, I've been trying for 3 years to make an all-in-one device, but yeah, I've learned the hard way that having devices just do their thing well is important. Accepting that just makes life a lot easier. So if you've been missing the vibe of a PSP Go, but also wished it was bigger, or if you never had a PSP Go, a sidekick phone, and you've always wanted to get in on the hype, this might be the way to go. I believe the pricing right now on sale is 180 USD. I'll leave that dollar to value comparison up to you and your personal situation, but at the end of the day, I'm really glad I have this in my collection, and honestly, it's encouraged me to just kick back and enjoy my game backlog some more. Like, I think I gamed more this past weekend than I have in like the last month combined, and half of the fun is just playing games in this thing, because it's a sliding game console, and we haven't seen a sliding handheld in so many years. I mean, aside from the iPhone thing from OSnap. There's just something indescribable about that feel of, I'm done gaming, and on with my day. Anyway, that's enough about the RG Slide. If you like this video, be sure to check out the video about the RG557, which is Anbernic's other most recent Android handheld, and that one had even more GPU beef in it, so maybe that one's your speed.